This video is aimed exclusively at seniors. While the term may sound uncomfortable to some, it has deep meaning for those who have accumulated decades of experience and bear the scars of many loves and disappointments. Today, I want to share the story of an older man who, in his search for a new purpose in life, began a relationship with a much younger woman. He was amazed by her vitality and intelligence. She was 20 years younger, radiated life, and a beauty he thought he would never find again. However, he did not know that this radiance hid shadows that only he would discover in time. From the beginning, he understood that it would not be an easy relationship. His friends had their opinions, young people criticized him, and he himself faced his own insecurities. But in his 70s, his heart still beats strong, and he wants to prove it to himself. Even if he managed to conquer and retain a young woman, his hesitation turned into obsession. He wanted to give it his all, as if it was the last love story of his life. He gave it a facelift, but the price to pay was enormous, and he didn't realize it until later. At first, everything was almost perfect. She showered him with kind words, praise, and compassion. He felt strong and virile, rediscovering a youth he thought distant. She knew exactly how to seduce him, and he succumbed to her every look and move. He went out of his way to please her, treating her like royalty. But what he doesn't realize is that she, little by little, begins to impose lesser demands, always with that air of superiority she takes on out of sheer attraction. The changes in her behavior become more and more evident as time goes by. Small humiliations begin to appear, camouflaged as subtle comments. She tells him that he should take better care of himself, because young people his age should not have such physical limitations. At first, he tried to laugh, thinking it was a joke, but the frequency increased and the laughter began to be felt. She kept reminding him that he was too old for her. The final straw came when she focused her criticism on his performance in bed. He, who had always believed he could bring affection and emotional satisfaction, found himself facing harsh and biting criticism. She claimed he was slow, predictable, and unable to satisfy her as a younger man would. He tried to argue, to convince her that age does not limit a person's ability to make others happy, but her comments were too cutting to ignore. Then she remembered the power he wielded, or more accurately, his method. He assured her that, despite his lack of youthful strength, he knew how to delight her in a special and unique way because of his dedication and care. He said it with a passion and confidence that few younger men could match. But instead of honoring him, she scoffed at what she saw as an old man's frantic attempt to be helpful. This mockery tore at his heart. He felt humiliated, but tried to convince himself that it was a test of patience and endurance. He hoped that, by being understanding, she would eventually see his courage and dedication. However, each of her statements pushed him to devalue himself further, and he began to see himself as an unimportant guy with no great value in the eyes of a young woman. For anyone watching this story, it may be easy to condemn his decision to stay. However, anyone who has lived a long life understands that love, especially in its most terrible form, can take us hostage and force us to accept things we would otherwise never have tolerated. He was no longer bound only by the young woman's youth, but also by the idea of being able to prove himself to someone who seemed unable to see beyond his own age. One night, after an argument that made him feel even smaller, he made a decision. He looked in the mirror and saw a man in his 70s with age lines on his face and the weight of experience in his eyes. He recognized that self-love had to speak louder because he could not live in the shadow of approval from someone who would never accept him as he was. He then decided to face it calmly. He indicated that he was ready to end the relationship because, no matter how much he loved her, he could not continue to be humiliated. She looked at him in astonishment, as if she didn't expect him to have the courage to do so. At that moment, he regained a little of the dignity he had lost with each of her comments. The conversation was unpleasant, but liberating. He felt he was finally showing his age, not in the sense of frailty, but in the sense of wisdom. He remembered all the years he had lived, the experiences he had gone through, and the courage he still possessed, no matter how many wrinkles he had or how old he was. As she left her home, she felt a sense of relaxation she hadn't experienced in months. He recognized that sometimes it is vital to accept that not everyone understands the value we bring, especially those who only see the surface. He recognized that by submitting to humiliation, he had lost himself. However, by freeing himself, he not only regained his self-esteem, but also the reassurance of a love that only he himself could offer. The days that followed were difficult to live with. Loneliness came back to haunt him, but it was a clean and dignified loneliness, without the burden of having to prove anything to anyone. He realized that even without it, he was still a good man, someone who embodied the pure spirit of what love is. This self-love allowed him to move forward. This event taught him that not all young people deserve to sacrifice their dignity, and that true love is one that accepts, respects, and values all people, regardless of their physical abilities or age. A few months later, she discovered new joys in life. She reconnected with old acquaintances, visited places she had always wanted to see, and rediscovered activities she had abandoned. He recognized that his worth did not depend on the approval of a younger woman, but rather on the peace he found in looking at himself. Every wrinkle on his face tells a story, and every gray hair marks a memory. He understood that growing older brings the wisdom to know what is truly important. He no longer needed to sacrifice himself to please others. On the contrary, he was more interested in his own satisfaction. This anecdote serves as a reminder to other older people who have the same doubts. The desire for love is understandable, but it should never come at the expense of inner serenity. Lessons are learned over time, and only those who have lived a long life understand the importance of preserving one's dignity in the face of the deceptive promises of youth. Looking back, she realized that this relationship had been a valuable learning opportunity. It was a lesson in acceptance and the importance of putting one's principles first, regardless of criticism. He learned that, to be loved, he must first love himself completely, with all his flaws and all his strengths. For him, ending the relationship meant regaining his identity. Many people see this story as an example of the importance of self-love, even when everything around us seems to conspire against our confidence. Only older people should see this movie, because they understand the value of dignity. He discovered that a man's worth is determined by his integrity in the face of adversity, not his age, and it is this integrity that transforms every wrinkle into a symbol of wisdom. From this story, I would like to offer 5 lessons for older people who have relationship problems. The first lesson is that, as appealing as the desire to recreate the glory of youth with someone younger is, it is critical to keep your feet on the ground and not get lost in the illusion. Many people, like the character, end up devoting their time and energy to someone who doesn't really appreciate who they are. The desire to prove that we still have vigor and capabilities can become a trap, forcing us to accept humiliations that we would never have endured in earlier stages of life. Love should not be a testing ground, but an environment of mutual respect and acceptance. The second lesson this story teaches us is the value of self-love. By accepting caustic comments about his performance and his age, he felt as if he was giving up a part of himself. He thought that tolerating these criticisms in the name of love was a noble action, but in reality, he was sacrificing his dignity. Loving yourself is a commitment that must precede any relationship, because to forget one's own worth is to expose oneself to the scorn of others. Recognizing that we deserve respect and affection is the foundation of any healthy relationship. The final lesson is to have the courage to say enough is enough, and to accept loneliness as a kind of peace, albeit temporary. When he decided to end the relationship, it was more than just a breakup. It was a rehabilitation for himself. He chose the most difficult path, but also the most worthwhile. Choosing to be alone rather than continue to be humiliated is a sign of strength. Sometimes, solitude is a place to restructure self-esteem, not a punishment. In truth, he gave himself the opportunity to find his inner calm, which no one could take away from him. The fourth lesson is that as we age, our experiences and memories become real treasures, and those who do not recognize this only shut themselves away in superficiality. Wrinkles, gray hair, every sign of time tells a story and provides a learning opportunity. He understood that he did not need to model himself on the image of an immaculate youth, because what he had was much deeper. Those who seek the superficial will never appreciate the value of accumulated wisdom. That is why it is useless to try to please someone who does not understand who we are. Being attentive to a partner's needs, especially physical closeness, demonstrates affection. He believed that, although he no longer had the physical vigor of his youth, he could express his devotion and desire in other ways. This display of affection and devotion often shows a man willing to put his partner's needs before his own pride. However, respect must be mutual. Offering some proximity is a sign of interest, but should not be interpreted as an obligation or cause for embarrassment. In this example, he learned that, no matter how hard he tried to please her, these gestures should be acknowledged. The lesson he draws is that true closeness requires respect and consideration, not judgment or criticism. If this story touched you and you think these lessons can help others, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Share this post with others who may need to reflect on the value of dignity and self-respect. The greatest life lessons come from the stories of people who have lived long enough to understand what is truly important.